we lose? There was one attendee in the waiting room, but they're gone now. Oh, no.
Oh, here they go. Yeah, Margaret, if you can elevate her to panelist.
Sorry, I didn't have her on my list originally, I don't think.
All good.
Let's see.
Hey, Margaret.
Hi. Good to see you. I had a computer malfunction today, so I'm on my phone. Oh yeah, I already told you that.
All good.
My compromise, it's like a
That's good. It's a little.
Margaret, I think we have one of your colleagues in the attendee group, unless they're,
Yes.
I don't know if they're observing or if they are presenting.
Simpriti is helping with notes. I was going to promote her either way in case she has any technical issues.
right.
Did you get that, Amanda?
Yep.
Yep.
We are.
Thank you.
Amanda may regret it, but she did also give me admin permission.
Yes, that's
I'll
good.
help with some of the lobby as well.
Everyone, good afternoon.
Everybody.
Yeah, it's
Hi,
Chris.
Kristen.
I think we're just waiting for everyone to join, so we'll give it a few minutes.
Pamela, who is the other person you were texting earlier? I didn't have a name. I just
Carol Cronin.
who?
Carol Cronin. I also sent this information to Evelyn. I wasn't sure. I know she's expressed interest in possibly, and she's joined some of them, so she may pop in. She's not sure.
Okay.
Perfect. And for those who have just joined, we're just giving a few more minutes for everybody to get in the door. Might have hit critical mass. What do you think, Pamela or Christian?
That's what I was just trying to count. I need to make sure I have 6 in the room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I do have you could do. I have 6 attendee committee members. We can start. Christian, if you'd like to open the meeting, I just want to start this meeting off by letting everyone know that this meeting is being recorded. If any member of the public would like to make public comment, I do ask that you put so in the chat, your name and the words public comment. We will take you in the order that they are received. Please do not leave public comments inside the chat. They will not be acknowledged. And I do ask that all the committee members do not write in the chat. Please speak your comments for the record.
Thank you, Pamela. Well, I'd like to just welcome everyone to the meeting. I know that it's been a little while since we last met, but I think there's some exciting progress that has been made on the strategic plan. I think this group's input is going to be very helpful as we continue to refine the plan. So thank you very much to everyone who is joining us this afternoon. Pamela, should we begin with any of the ministerial aspects? Should we approve the last minutes?
We just have to do EDI statement. If you could please read that for me, Christian.
I'd be happy to do so, Pamela. Thank you. This is our BPL opening statement. I'll simply note, as we do at a board level, that the trustees are committed to affirming our commitment to racial equity and to the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion as is set forth in this letter. The statement rather, and as a committee, we echo that sentiment and affirm our commitment as well. So welcome again. If I may, as an administrative matter, ask for a motion to approve the last minutes.
Can I ask a favor? Can we do roll call first, Christian?
That's fine. Go ahead, Pamela.
All righty. Joe Berman,
Here.
Heidi Brooks will be absent. Cheryl Cronin, Ron Dorsey,
Here.
David Leonard,
Here.
Ray Lou,
Here.
Jose Massa will be absent. Paula Seki,
Here.
Jonathan Soroff, and Christian Westra.
Here.
Just want to make note that as I sent a message out to the committee earlier this month, Jennifer Hawes, who is the branch librarian from Rosendale, had resigned. She was leaving the BPL, so she resigned her position from the committee. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Pamela. And so with that, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? The minutes are approved.
Just want to make note that Cheryl Cronin has joined the meeting. I see you, Cheryl. Just-
Yes, sorry about that.
That's okay.
No worries. Welcome, Cheryl. Great. And then I think there was one other request which we can handle offline.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, at this point, I'll hand it over to the Gensler team to begin sharing some of the frameworks that have been developed. And I, again, welcome the participation in this committee and look forward to what I expect will be a rich discussion.
Sounds good. So hello, everyone. We've got members from the Gensler and MSS team on the call. Wonderful to see everyone again. And as Christian mentioned, sort of show the current state of the plan, get some input around the mission, vision, and values and some of the strategic roles that have settled into a more final form. And then also we're looking forward to facilitating a discussion around initiatives today and bring sort of the strategic thinking from this group to the current work to date. We'll be hopping in. It is Zoom, so just a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, as Pamela mentioned, feel free to jump in at any time. We will be taking some notes live on the screen as we go. But if we miss anything or head to next slide too quickly, feel free to use the chat and to let us know to go back to finish the discussion. Okay. So what have we got on the agenda for the group today? Obviously, we'll be going through a little bit of the strategic plan, a review the main sections of the document for any sort of comments and input. And then the bulk of our discussion will be around the strategic initiatives. We've got a few discussion pieces to run through with the group, and then we'll sort of set where we are in time and the remaining steps for the strategic plan this fall. Right, so talking through the overview, we've, as far as the framework goes, just a little bit of a recap of the skeleton that we've been aiming at. Obviously, our guiding principles are associated with the core value, the mission and the vision. We'll go through those in a little bit more detail. Those are supported by the strategic roles that we play. And coming from the strategic roles are the strategic initiatives, sort of how we live those roles. And informing those are implementation strategies and organizational shifts. We'll be speaking through mainly the top three today, but a little bit of a preview of the current work around organizational shifts and implementation strategies. Okay, so we shared in the pre-read, or you may have seen it in other forums more recently, the current draft. It begins with definitions of values, mission, and vision, as well as presenting our core value, free to all, that will both speak to the long past of this motto that's been on our buildings, but also how we can evolve this into the future. I'm just hitting this at a high level, but we'll pause after introducing this for any comments. And then the latest version of vision and mission, I'll just zoom in a little bit to make it easier to see on the screen. The vision is an inclusive community propelled by curiosity, connection, and growth, sort of guiding our direction for the future, supported by a mission to open a world of discovery, to enrich lives, and elevate every community. And all three sort of pairing together to set our future direction. So we'll pause here briefly. The main thing we want to hear from this group, and you may have seen these in various drafts in the weeks prior to this session, but would love to hear from this group what excites you or motivates you about these components, any feedback on this piece.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I think from my perspective, the free to all message is one that resonates, and I think we've discussed that in the past. I like the way that we've thought about reinventing the statement in a way that teases out some other concepts and relates to the values that we celebrate. But I agree. I think it'd be great to get the broader group's thoughts on these slides and whether or not this resonates.
Can you make it bigger again? I'm sorry. Just can you?
Of course.
expand?
Mhm.
I guess my only thought, but I think it's sort of typical of a strategic plan and sort of this slide of a strategic plan, is that it's obviously very, very, very aspirational. And you wouldn't necessarily know in reading both vision and mission that you were talking about a library.
Mhm.
And I wonder if that's right or wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would, if I could jump in, this is Joe. I echo what Cheryl said. It's very broad. I don't want to say generic, but it is kind of, I guess, generic. And my sort of related question is, I don't know, what I'm left questioning is, so how does this get, like, how do we use this to translate all of this into action? Because, and I guess this is maybe this is sort of saying the same thing that Cheryl said, but in a different way, which is, to what, I know that we're going to talk about, strategies to impact, how we use this to impact what we're doing, but I mean, you could go in a million different directions with this. So I'm not sure, I guess maybe more specificity. And as Cheryl said, maybe for the library.
I think just to respond to that, and Aaron and others can jump in, but I hear you, Joe and Cheryl. I think these are very open-ended statements. I don't think they're designed to be very specific. I think as we drill down further, we'll see that we eventually come to a set of strategic initiatives that really are much more concrete and will relate to the values and vision and mission. And so I don't think it ends here. I think these are really the animating principles, but they're not, I don't think they're designed to be, Aaron and team can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they're designed to be highly specific or even a way of necessarily prioritizing one specific objective over another.
Sarah, that was actually one of our early goals, though, is not to write something that that you could read and it'd be like the Parks Department could use it, or Centers for Youth and Families could use it, right? So if we haven't quite nailed it yet, I'm interested in that reaction, because that was something we talked about.
I see Ron's hand up too. I think, Ron, you haven't really been in some of the staff and leadership meetings, obviously. So I welcome your thoughts and your perspectives generally.
Sure, thank you. I think the free to all piece almost needs to read the slide above it to understand kind of what feeds it and why it may be powerful. And I may even choose a couple of those phrases instead of free to all, but it feels like the attempt here might almost be to describe kind of the intellectual freedom or the freedom to grow as almost an inalienable right. Free to all doesn't quite say it in and of itself. You kind of need more context there, but there's something about the freedom to become that you're trying to describe. I'm just not sure free to all
Mhm.
gets it without these other things. Now, discover, explore, there are a couple of things in the mission that describe what you mean by freedom. And I don't know if there's some way to join discovery and growth in
Mhm.
some ways with the concept of freedom to say something just a little bit more powerful. You know, does it have to describe what we think of as a library? I'm still thinking about that one. It may not necessarily say that, but at the same time, I think we are trying to communicate something different. So I need to ponder that a little bit more.
Ron, I love your statement, inalienable right, because I think that gets at the heart of what the purpose of Free to All isn't. One of the things that this work has really debated is, have we been using free to mean free, as in, like, the resources are free, but in fact, no, it's deeper than that. It's freedom to be who one wants to be, freedom of what this country promises. So I think that reinforcement of inalienable right is undergirds the work.
I mean, I think we should also bear in mind that rarely will any of these phrases stand alone in their entire isolation from everything else. And I think it was an important point to pause to reflect on these, but in general, they will exist as page 1 or 2 of the whole document. And honestly, it's how the whole thing fits together that will be most important from a judgment point of view. I do think free to all, is our core value, has been. It connects us to our history, but also enables us to, play it forward as library in a way that is starting to get articulated here. And I think, the vision and mission. Vision is once again, it is the type of, when we are successful at doing everything that we are going to do, the vision that we will bring about is this community, and that strikes me as being very much about who we are. And mission is how we do it. But yeah, it's about knowledge, it's about literacy, it's about services, it's about our spaces, it's especially about our staff. It's about all those things that are going to come next on the following pages.
I totally hear all the points made, and I'm not going to belabor this. I personally think that in particular, the mission statement does in some ways, I think there's a real lack of clarity in the mission statement. And I think in some ways, what I worry about is that it actually leaves us open to criticism, that we don't get quite what we are. I would personally would just urge you to think a little bit, like even the term elevate every community. To me, this would be a whole lot better if it said, and elevate every community through or by, so that it more specifically references what the library does for community and for people. So I get the vision statement being really mushy, but this is a really, really general mission statement. And I know it's not the whole statement, but again, I just think it's like, I think in some ways it's kind of does us a disservice, but anyway, I'm not going to belabor it.
I don't think that's belaboring. I think that's a constructive comment, Cheryl. I mean, I think this is general. I like the idea of adding a conjunction and adding by, and trying to think a little bit more about how we want to affect the opening of a world of discovery that enriches lives and elevates every community. So I think that is something for us to consider, and maybe that I see Aaron and others taking notes here, but that seems like a constructive, interesting perspective.
And again, I'm just gonna, I don't want to belabor Cheryl's belaboring, but even on the vision, right? An inclusive community propelled by curiosity, connection, and growth. Well, yeah, we're an inclusive community, but we're a library. The vision is to be an inclusive, even if you said an inclusive library community or an inclusive community of learners, an inclusive community of readers. Something, maybe community of learners, because we're not just readers, but I would, or seekers of, I guess community of learners might be something you might want to put in vision.
I just want to say, I think the temptation to add that clause, that through or by, then we have to be careful we don't just do a list, because I would challenge anyone to be able to come up with 1 or 2 words that everything the library does. And we don't want to have a mission statement that has this lofty statement then followed by a list of everything we do, because that wouldn't make sense.
I agree with that.
So yeah, so we just have to find the right words if we do that. But I think the vision too, the vision is, we approached it as, what is the end state if the library does its thing? It's not really describing the library so much as the results of the library acting at its best.
I had a thought. I just wanted to share. I remember one of our meetings, actually, it might have been a trustee meeting, where the head of the Museum of Science came and shared a little bit about their strategic planning process. I just wanted to read their mission and vision because I thought it was really good. The mission was to inspire a lifelong love of science in everyone, and the vision was a world where science belongs to each of us for the good of all of us. I do think I agree with Cheryl. You do use the mission statement a lot, so you want it to be representative, I think, of the world in which we live, but simple. So I just hearken back to the Museum of Science. I just thought it was simple, crisp, clear. If you took it on its own, you would know it was Science Museum. I mean, you feel like you're connected in that way. So just a thought.
Yeah, that I really like that mission statement as well, Paul, and that's I do think that it's worth investing time to get the mission statement right, because that is something that, to your point, Paula, we're going to be using in lots of different places.
Sounds good. Obviously, we're taking plenty of notes on the side. Any other comments just before we start jumping into roles?
Did you get this feedback, Erin, when you all did the San Francisco Public Library version of this? I mean, again, not to compare and contrast, but to compare and contrast. When I look at theirs, it has sort of a similar, probably no surprise, broadness, right? Their mission is connect our diverse communities to learning opportunities in each other. And the vision is a democratic, equitable, and vibrant San Francisco for everyone. I guess. What's your feeling? Did any of this come up, I guess, when you went that go around?
I'll defer to Margaret on that one.
I mean, and y'all are lucky because Michael's right there where he can ask the specific memory question in San Francisco. It's interesting. I mean, the process was a little bit different, and I would say it's the way that the vision and the mission statement were the process in which we used to write them actually started with fewer words. And so the addition of everyone, I think, came from some staff engagement work around this time. So in the memory, there was a similar process in which at this moment in time, some real eurekas started to form that helped to refine the work, but the process was different, if that helps to answer the question. So it was much, the original vision and mission statements were fewer words that got additive. I think what I'm seeing us go through with this process today is, are these the right, have we completed the sentence effectively? I think the balance also that we're hearing too, and Ron, I loved how you said, I'm not sure how I feel yet if this has to state library so explicitly. It's that we are in a transition of what a public library's definition is. We are in a very important transition of what BPL's definition of itself is. And I think that's the balance that we're trying to strike. I think, as Michael's stating, if we go too far down the road with the mission statement and say we are achieving this role for the city because of the things we do, we don't want to limit that to being that laundry list. So I think that's the art of this conversation. But I think definitely capturing these notes and the sentiments helps inform that last turn of the screw to get it just right, what resonates for y'all.
Okay. So then we want to dive into roles, and I think, again, appreciate all of the feedback on the mission, vision, and values. The roles are now how we live these mission, vision, and core values. So we'll zoom in. The current state of the roles is these four. Lifelong learning and research partner, that we inspire a love of literacy, discovery, and scholarly exploration at all. This we know is one of our strengths. This is also in some of the discussions as far as where does literacy specifically show up, and trying to ensure that's elevated within this framework. Welcoming destination, that speaks a little bit more to the places and the breadth of the footprint of the various locations and branches of the Boston Public Library, that we're seeking to create active, inclusive third places where every person can chart their own path. Also speaking to the role around being a trusted resource, both the dual function of a place for reliable information, but also as a place to connect with partners and services to meet the needs of our patrons and enrich their lives. And then lastly, we've had a lot of great discussions around the role to reach beyond the walls of the library and the community engager role, expanding the reach beyond the physical walls, meeting communities where they are, and speaking both to what the experience is like within the library, but also without in the city. To zoom out what we've got on this slide, we just have some thumbnails of that larger section within the document. Each of these is not just the tagline at the beginning. Each of them includes sort of a detailed description of what that role means, the key goals and outcomes, current bright spots, as well as how these roles meet community needs, as well as teeing up the initiatives that we'll discuss in more detail. But as a place to pause for discussion today, we just had this overview. The pre-read that we sent includes the full spectrum of pages, but wanted to pause to talk about how these roles resonate for this group, and again, gather some feedback on this piece.
Yeah, and I think another way of putting it might be, do we think we've captured the key things that we are and should be doing, or are there major things that are missing from this framework that we might want to consider doing?
I don't know if I'm talking too much, but I actually really like this, frankly. The one thing that as I'm looking at, we've got kind of two categories that are really about you know, sort of the community piece of it, and convening and all of that, and that's the welcoming destination and community engager. And I just, again, bearing in mind that we're a library and we so want to play that role for sure, but are we saying enough about learning and sort of intellectual pursuit and those things? I'm just throwing it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And does the lifelong, we have this wedge, forgive me for using the word wedge, but we have this wedge called lifelong learn. Sorry, I'm getting vertigo, but
sorry.
moving on. Lifelong learning and research partner, which entails inspiring a love of literacy, discovery, and scholarly exploration for all. Does that not address the concern, Cheryl, or are we not hitting it the right way?
I guess what I'm questioning a little bit is, if I was looking at this, I would think, okay, how do we think of ourselves And 50% of what we're saying is that we think of ourselves with, to me, less emphasis on the learning piece than might be appropriate. So it's not, yes, yes, that addresses it, but when you think about it, like, again, it feels like we're de-emphasizing a little bit that we're a library. We are certainly emphasizing that we want to be a hub in the community, and we want to be where people convene and all of those things. But it does feel a little bit like we are de-emphasizing what I think is so unique about us. So I'm just questioning whether that's where we want to be, just strategically.
Go ahead, Ron.
So I don't know exactly what the statement is, but maybe to Cheryl's point, or where it fits under what category, there may need to simply be a statement somewhere that says, we think a 21st century library is ... So that it becomes unavoidable
Right.
how we're conceptualizing this thing, and it becomes very explicit if we're imagining it as something different from what it's been, or different from the ways that others do it, that we're saying it plainly. And then it's got to have a relationship to vision, mission, all the other elements.
I really like that point, because we're leading with, look, we're a library. We start with that, but then we kind of, this is how we think of ourselves given our role as a library.
I know Ray's got his hand up and David just came off mute. I think we'll go in that order, and then Michael.
Yeah, I agree. I like that, Ron. I think that's a great way to contextualize it all. Carol, maybe to your point, I think there's an element here that it is intentional, and I don't mean that in a bad way necessarily, right? I mean, I think that there is something, at least when I, came on, I was surprised, but now I've completely bought in that we are part of the Department of Human Services, and there's sort of the broader community within Boston that we serve, right? You can almost say that we're sort of 2.5 of these wedges. Like, even trusted resource doesn't bring to mind necessarily library right away. I think the trusted resource, at least my interpretation, is providing resources beyond sort of a typical just books, right, and literacy, right? It could be a place where somebody is learning how to fill out their 1040, and you trust that area. So I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing, but I think contextualizing it, Ron, could reconcile and thread the needle there, as they say.
I'll let Michael go.
Margaret knows what I'm going to say. I just want to avoid using the term 21st century library, because it's kind of outdated now, because we're well into the 21st century library. And so, and Margaret, you had a good alternate phrase for that. But I just also wanted to address Cheryl's point, because I think the lifelong learning and research partner, although it's not explicitly stated, the whole point of the community engager and being out in the community is not only to be out in the community, but it's really about reaching people digitally and outside of the walls to provide those services. So it isn't just about the community. It's delivering the lifelong learning and research partner services when people can't come into the library and can't. But maybe that's not as clear enough, but I think that one is also, I feel, tied very much to the services we provide as a lifelong learning and research partner.
That's the purpose of that bucket. Michael, that makes total sense. What we're really saying is we want to go to where people are, instead of insisting that they come to us. But if that's the goal of that section, I don't really think the title says that.
We struggled with that a lot.
Yeah, I continue to like centering lifelong learning and research partner, and we haven't updated the diagram, but it probably should be the one at the top in order to make that point. But I think these other 3 roles, even if we still need to keep tweaking the language a tiny bit. And yes, the journey to community engager was challenging, and maybe it has one more stop to go to capture exactly what it's about. But I was really impressed to see how out of the process these other vital things that today's modern library does got celebrated as much as the learning focus or the traditional focus. So many people simply come to use the space. Our buildings and space are no longer just the thing within which library things happen. They are the very essence for some people of who we are and what we do and what we have to offer community. And, you know, the trusted resource section, while it certainly spans the incredibly talented library workers who are themselves trusted resources, and the materials which we curate as being the work, it is also true that we're the antidote to disinformation in many ways. And so that plus the connection to, you know, if you're unhoused or dealing with a very serious issue or a challenge, this is a place where you can trust the resources of government to connect you to what you absolutely need. So yeah, I think we can continue to play with the language, but I'll fight tooth and nail to preserve all four of these roles as they currently exist, because they capture who we are today and where we're going next.
I'm going to duck forward to the next section as we're working our way through. So within the pre-read that was sent, you may have noticed there's a few sections that are firmly in progress. We are currently working on finalizing these sections. This conversation today is part of the data gathering to complete these sections, but we did want to call attention to some of the initial pages that were included in the draft around organizational shifts. I think we also had a great discussion this afternoon with some members from the unions as far as what's the foundation that needs to be built to support these aspirations for the future.
Erin, can you make this larger?
Yeah, I can do.
Thank you.
So in speaking to organizational shifts, it might be a tiny bit blurry on the screen, but I'll try to go in a little bit farther. These are initial topics that our team is fleshing out around what are the enablers that will support us in living these roles and achieving this mission and vision. I'll read through them, and then Kim or Margaret, feel free to add. I'll just do a quick pass. So some of the topics that we've heard, and this is coming from the workshops, the staff survey, we've been doing some leadership interviews as well as benchmarking to fill out this section. But speaking towards creating a supportive culture that both speaks to having fun and encouraging experimentation and innovation with service delivery, having ways to activate and cultivate skills and leadership. I think we had a bit of a discussion this afternoon around what are the pathways to grow people within the organization and what are the skills that we need to train to serve our future roles. Continuing like the strategic plan itself, establishing a transparent and collaborative process for goals, priorities, and initiatives to support the plan. Again, I'll just go through the full pause for Kim to layer on and then comments. EDI as a key organizational capacity building so that EDI is included in all aspects of our organization, our cultures and practices. Prioritizing communication and awareness. This is less communicating to the public and more understanding. I think we heard a lot around there's so many amazing things that we do. I wish I knew more about what we did. So how do we communicate internally about understanding the breadth of what we do and celebrating that and creating breaking down barriers to connection, continuing to develop those internal resources to support collections and research, as in that role as a premier research library that is unique to BPL. Community engagement and impact. So understanding those connections, having a comprehensive approach to partnerships and understanding local needs so that, again, we can use all of our locations to reflect our communities. And then partnership around what is the approach to local and system-wide partnerships so that we can share goals and work together to achieve these roles. I'll pause briefly, Kim, because I'm sure I probably missed a couple things in that quick overview.
So just so that we understand, Erin, these are internal organizational shifts that we think are things that either we're not doing or that we should focus more on doing internally and organizationally. And if we do these things better, that should help us to achieve excellence in the various roles that are identified in the previous slide. Is that the way to think about this?
Kim, do you want to address that?
I think you stated it well, Christian. I mean, I think in any case, it's the kind of how do you strengthen the organization so it can strengthen its communities? Because all of this will come, you know, I mean, we all know that, I mean, it came from some of the people in here just really wanting to see this, like, people will say pipelines for growth, or who are our next generation of leaders? Are we actually cultivating them? And that's all really nice to say, but those kind of investments in staff they're time consuming in a great way. And they can make and you can see how they make so many of the initiatives that we'll be reviewing next possible. And I think I really like seeing them in a plan, like to acknowledge that all the great work for the community doesn't happen if we don't take a really measured and thoughtful look at, you know, today's operational state. I don't think there's any organization that would ever say it's operating perfectly or doesn't need to shore up its foundation. I'll also say my experience in public libraries, and this is probably not unique to public libraries, but it certainly was in DC, is it's also that importance of balancing all the new things you want to do with just making sure you do your core really well and right. And kind of sometimes with a new strategic plan, the first thing is just like, we're off to the races, new things. And you're like, careful. The caution is to really, it's equally, if not more important, to make sure we really know where we want to put our house in better order to enable those things.
Yeah, so that's helpful. I guess just a very brief observation. I mean, so that makes intuitive sense. I think that it's clear that there are organizational enhancements that any organization can undertake to perform better. But do we think David, do we think that this is actually sufficiently specific as to be helpful? Some of these are at such a level of generality, a supportive culture. No one's going to disagree with that. I guess I'm just, is this useful? I guess is my question. Or is it more useful to think about really specific, I mean, maybe not really specific, but just is it useful to think about more specific things that organizationally we feel like are handicapping the organization? Like, for example, at a board level, we've talked a lot about the difficulty in filling vacancies, and maybe there's nothing that we can do about certain of the impairments, like the requirement to be a Boston resident or what have you. But is this useful, David and team, to you, or is this at such a level of generality as to not be useful?
I think there's more. I'm sorry, I know, Paul, you have your hand up. I think just to answer that quick question, there's more work to be done here. I think these are important principles. I think there's one or two that aren't quite right yet. And these should be broad categories for organizational improvement with other initiatives under them. Like, where is fundraising? Where is removal of bureaucracy, for example, in the case of vacancies? I wouldn't make it so much about the individual tactic at this point, but removing bureaucracy or barriers to process improvement. There's more work to be done here, which is why I think getting everybody's feedback in this section is really important, because the roles themselves are about how we impact the communities. So where is the place to have strategic initiatives and goals that make us a better organization in service of those roles and those initiatives? Sorry, Walla.
Sorry.
No.
There's another page here, isn't there, Erin, to show?
I'd
We're not
say
ready to
it's
show.
more of
Okay.
a double click within it. In the
That's
draft, we have sort of longer explanations for each of these, to your point, Sarah, but for the discussion
ready.
here, I would agree with David. It's a section that we're working on. I think it's a section that is very tied to the initiatives discussion. As we narrow down the initiatives, what are the organizational shifts that will best support these? And there is a bit of a feedback loop within that, as far as this is what we've heard prior to a lot of the discussions on the initiatives, and in its final form, they need to be more of a straight line connection between the two.
It's incredibly important to answer your question, Christian. Yeah, I need to work, but incredibly important. Sorry, Paula.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I-
Yeah, I would say a big organizational shift is around philanthropy, and we should state that pretty clearly, because I think in order to achieve a lot of these objectives that we're setting forth in this plan, particularly as we move toward McKim, we have to exercise muscles that have never been exercised before from both the library and the fund, and it's a shift. It's an organizational shift. So philanthropy should be a big piece of this, because we're trying to go from good to great, and that delta is going to happen through private investment primarily. So I really think it's missing. If we can figure out a way to add that, that would be wonderful. Happy to help.
Just following up on that, I actually think Paula's point is so important, because I think the reality we're dealing with is we are essentially a publicly funded entity, and we know that the availability of public funds over the next few years is not going to increase. So there is going to be significant pressure on Paula and her team and private fundraising to achieve this. So I think that's just so important to remember, number one. Number two, one thing I feel like we don't do here in the plan that I've seen so far is that if you were reading this cold, I think you might think, well, what the heck has the library been doing for the past 100 years? And I feel like the library deserves a little bit of setting the stage somewhere in this plan, either at the very beginning of the plan or here, a page or two about, look, here's what we've been doing right, or here's where we're at. Because not because I'm feeling defensive, having been on the board for years, or because I'm trying to defend the management team. The reality is, if we don't say we've done some things right, then how can anybody have confidence that we're going to be able to do this work? So I just think we should, I don't know, I'd be curious to hear what other people think about that. But I feel like we should say a little bit more, like I said, to almost like, look, here's what we've been doing right. We need to make some shifts and pivots. But anyway, we have some tools in place. We've been doing some things well, whatever. You get it.
I would actually, oh, I'm sorry, Ray, go ahead.
You go,
Okay.
I'll go after you.
Yeah, just responding directly to what Cheryl said. I hear what you're saying, although I don't, and people obviously have a lot more experience with strategic plans than I do. I don't know that it's implicit in this that, you know, we haven't been doing the right thing all the way along. This is obviously forward looking, not backward looking. I mean, I guess we could talk about how, you know, we're a 150-year-old institution, or however many years old we are, and, you know, first, you know, public library, you know, whatever in a big city. I mean, we could have a little bit of that, and, you know, talk about building on the strengths and our branches and everything else. But I didn't take that away from this, Cheryl, necessarily, because I see this as a forward-looking document. So that's just my reaction to that.
One piece, I mean, and I'll defer to Aaron and Margaret and others, you know, that I've seen in strategic plans that I've done, is set the context for sort of what is going on, right? That sort of is the impetus in a way for the strategic plan. It's not quite headwinds and tailwinds, but, you know, where are we coming from, so to speak? And Cheryl, that may answer your piece here, sort of a slide or just a paragraph on that.
Yeah, I think just as a quick yes and to that piece, we've got sort of two homes One is in the introduction chapter, we are hoping to have Cheryl, to your point, set the context, here's our background, our current strengths. So I was jotting down the bullet points because we're currently working on that section. So I'm like, yes, this is perfect. And then the other home is in each of the roles. After the description, we also have existing bright spots of how we're currently living this role, because we definitely heard in a lot of the discussions, like there's a lot we're already doing that is reaching towards this. So I think just for wayfinding in the document, those are the two primary locations, but we can definitely, as we're completing it, sort of look for other ways to tell that story. And sorry, Christian, your hand was up.
Yeah, I think we're gravitating on the same thing here, but I agree with Cheryl, I agree with Ray, and it sounds like maybe we're planning on doing this in the final version, but I would have thought that we ought to have something in the beginning that does show the impact that we have, the number of, for basic principles that aren't first principles that people may not know, not being initiated, just the number of branches who we're serving, what the funding is and where it's coming from. I having at least something that gives those basic issues, and then also trying to tee up some of the things that we're frustrated about, or things that we think are not working 100%. Maybe there's not quite sure how we do that, but I think we keep going back to the fact that there's so much programming and the communication isn't as clear as it might be, and then there's this enormous requirement for there's McKim, and they need to raise a huge amount of capital for that in a way that, to Paula's point, will excite and energize the philanthropic community. And I think we have a lot of what we need here in this presentation, the way that it works, but I think there's probably some table setting at the beginning. You know, what are we doing well? What are we worried about? You know, how do we set the stage for what this plan is meant to do in terms of the call to action?
Yeah, I think these all came out of the conversations about where could we improve or where could we do better. But perhaps that's gotten lost in the positioning within this document. You know, and I thank you all for giving a little credit for all of our accomplishments. And you know, it is a great 176-year history. Or Joe's gone. Okay, never mind. But equally, sometimes I go home and I do in fact ask myself, what on earth were we doing for 100 years that we're in a couple of these strange opportunities. So I think this is a section where there is more work to do. I think this feedback around our capacity is really important to center. And there may be a couple of things that need to get centered here. And you know, is research and collection development, is that really part of our is that a philosophy, or is that a part of our learning partner role from the other section? I think there's still some placement questions to have. And at the end of the day, the three main assets that we have are our staff, our collections, and our buildings. Those are our three assets. And how we organize around those, I think, needs to be here somewhere as well.
If I could just please remind everyone, please don't leave your comments in the chat, because it is a public meeting. I need you to speak them out, just so everyone knows. And I have two members that need to leave by 5:30, so I just want you to be mindful of time.
Okay.
Ron.
One element of strategy that I think is implied in here, but is not explicit, are a set of strategic goals. So, and Michael, your point is taken about the use of the 21st century language, although I would argue that very few civic institutions are modern. Most are like some adaptation of their 19th century conceptualization. So whatever we call it needs to be modern and future facing. But if it's that, what are the goals that the organization has for itself? Because that's another piece that gives context to, well, what are the roles? The roles have to make sense vis-a-vis the thing that you say you're trying to accomplish, the game that you're trying to change, the new thing that you're trying to be, and it kind of cascades from there.
We've been calling it the ambition that BPL has for its community.
And it's actually, Ron, a very good tee up to shift the discussion towards initiatives. Ray, I saw your hand went up and then down. I guess final comment before I transition there.
Maybe just agreeing with Ron, right?
Mhm.
And I think you've heard me say this before too, is, is there a layer? And I'm not suggesting that we go back to the drawing board anymore, but, roles, goals, and then initiatives. But, we can move on and see sort of with initiatives, capture what Ron is talking about.
Sounds good. And then this one was up briefly. I think it speaks a little bit to the sections that are remaining. There will be an opening letter, context for the plan, who is engaged, as well as a conclusion and acknowledgements. So again, just for awareness. And then for Pamela's reference, I think we have covered out loud most of what's in the chat, except an additional cover letter could also be a good spot for accomplishments and strengths within the roles. So going to head to the next. So to the question around goals and initiatives, sort of what are we going to do to live these roles? That is where we wanted to head with the discussion as well. So speaking to the strategic initiatives, we wanted to speak briefly as to sort of where this listing has evolved from to the point where it is at for today's discussion. There have been inputs throughout the process around what could these roles look like. I think different ways this has been facilitated around the roles is sort of what are the key moments where this could happen? What are the outcomes of each of these roles? And we've been doing a lot of iterating over the past few months around these pieces, as well as inputs from the staff survey, steering group, and various versions over the last 2 to 3 months that have been evolving to today's list. I think, Margaret, you just wanted to say a couple words before we dive into the discussion.
I just, Sarah, Lisa, David, Sarah, I think you have them posted in your office, like an architect's office, but they've been doing a tremendous amount of work that has really honored the process of using, we've been working 9 months together in a workshopping process that has been building on the ambitions and aspirations that we started with folks like y'all, community need work with the staff to really create this evidence-based process that is generating these initiatives that are coming from the staff and leadership's work, making sense of the mayor's initiatives, making sense of the community breakfast and the community partners goals and alignments, and where they see the strengths of BPL and what they need from the BPL moving forward. So this, this evidence-based process has really resulted in a significant amount of initiatives that I think, and I'll let David also reiterate this, that your smarts are really going to help guide prioritization, sequencing, what's exciting for you all as you see them being developed, and where can we take them further?
And can I ask a question as somebody who is not a business person, who doesn't do strategic planning as a career? I guess this slide and the one prior to this, I don't understand them. And I guess what I'm wondering is are we talking about like specific things that the library is going to do that are new, or we can enhance? Maybe go back to the one before this. Just I don't understand this. And what does it mean that we're going to do initiatives and strategic role development and analysis of community needs and challenges? What does that mean in reality to those of us who don't do this all the time? And what's that going to look like?
So let me zoom in on one of these for an example. So within, and this is available in more detail in the pre-read, the PDF. I can also distribute that following the meeting. So within each of the roles, there's a 3-page spread, which is an introduction to the role, some of the goals and outcomes, bright spots, and then each one ends with a listing of strategic initiatives. So what are the hows to make this happen? We can run through some of these, but just for a flavor of sort of what these look like for each one. They are grouped together under topics, but the prior page diagram is just how did we get to the current list of these within all the roles? It's not meant to be a process for the strategic plan. It was more for awareness, this listing of initiatives, the current state, what iterations has it come through, if that makes sense.
Let me just ask a specific question in response to that, Aaron. So for example, I'm looking at the slide, actually keep it big for those of us who have bad eyesight. Expand digital literacy programs to ensure patrons of all skill levels can use technology to find the resources they need. That sounds great. I think think it's a wonderful initiative. I mean, is that what you're talking about, sort of that level of specificity? And then if so, then do we go even more specific? Like, how do we expand digital literacy? I mean, how does this turn
What
into
are the
practice?
what are the tactics?
I mean, I can take that into
That's just as an
detail.
that's just as an example,
example.
because that one's on the screen right now. That's
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good one because it's pretty tangible.
Mhm.
So it's easy to relate to. So, if our role in community is indeed to be someone's lifelong learning partner, so that is about access to information and knowledge, which may be mediated in person or may be mediated through technology. In this particular initiative, it is talking about digital literacy. And digital literacy writ large becomes the skills, the technology, and the connectivity that's required to participate almost today in every aspect of society. You cannot be a full human being in modern society without that level of digital literacy. We might want to pretend it's other than that, but that's just a fact. And many people just don't have that, and they won't get it unless the library is the provider. So this initiative is really how we deliver on that role in this instance. Within that, that means we need broadband at all our locations. We need Wi-Fi connectivity. We need librarians who have the skills and library assistants who have the skills to teach courses, to develop courses. So it's really, here's a device, here's a connection, here's some skills. And those
And
would be
obviously-
tactics under this particular initiative.
And that obviously is going to drive your budgetary decisions, right? I mean,
does.
you have to figure out, okay, how much money do we need to do this? Then obviously, because you can't do everything, you have to decide what's a priority and what you're not going to do. Right. So, okay.
Yes, and
So-
you
so
you
one
just asked the
question-
P word, the priority word, which is going to be the most difficult thing for all of us to do. But Erin
So
will
one
get to that
question,
in a second.
so I guess my next follow-up question from my first one would be, okay, so we see all these that's, as you said, David, that's a very tangible one, digital literacy. There's a lot of them here.
There are.
So obviously this is going to have to get prioritized and winnowed somehow, I assume.
At least prioritized in a way that we resource them in a way that we could actually do, or we declare some of them to be aspirational that require more funding or more capacity, or perhaps if we're lucky, we find some things that we can stop doing in order to do these that are initiatives. But in many ways, I think learning this process, our litmus test is for each role we're saying that's what we're going to do. Do we have the right initiatives to measure whether we can be successful in providing that role? And are there initiatives that are so core to who we are that they go beyond those roles and need to be listed here too? So that's really the point we're at in this process. And you are 1000% correct, if that's possible. You're 100% correct that a prioritization exercise must happen to do resource leveling and know what becomes active in year 1, what becomes active in year 2, what grows in year 3, and so forth. Because otherwise we end up with a plan that is too aspirational and we can't execute, or that is so aspirational that we all agree to, but we do not have the resources to do it.
Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to take us off on this sidetrack, but thank you for that.
No, I mean that this is
It's the
becoming clearer
perfect
and clearer in
patterning.
my mind over the last several weeks. So that's why it's fresh.
And I would say, Joe, the very next part of the discussion today, we do want to talk about a couple different models and experiments around prioritization to get some feedback from this group. So it's completely on agenda, on topic. Michael, I saw you had your hand up for a
I'm
bit.
gonna pass to keep things moving.
Okay, sounds good.
I
So
do want to make one point that I think is also very important, Joe, to your question about are we doing this now? And in almost 99% of these initiatives, it's probably a yes, but to what scale and to what ambition? So that's another level of complexity because yes, BPL is impacting folks' ability to have digital access, but is it to the scale in which the ambition drives? And so what does that mean for capacity and resources too?
And I guess quick question here, but also proposing an alternative. If we know there's a lot of initiatives to chew through, and just for the discussion today, we can also, our prompt was, are there pieces of the initiatives that you're excited about or top initiatives, but recognizing would love to give the time for everyone to have had a chance to read it. Maybe we can send that question as a follow-up to this session. I'm seeing some nodding on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long list that I think is going to be difficult to digest and prioritize on this call, but I think the input of the group would be welcome. We've talked about a number of times the importance of having a small number of marquee initiatives that really will animate and inspire stakeholders in the community. You know, I think a lot of these initiatives came out of the staff and leadership meetings. So I wonder if there's anything that the people who participated in those meetings would point to as the one or two initiatives that they're most excited about. Maybe we're not at that point yet, but I think it's a little hard. I think it's going to be critical for us to come up with a few things that are simple to communicate that reflect the ambition of this project and just convey clearly what we're trying to do and what you know, why people in the broader community should be excited. Before we solicit further input from the staff and leadership participants of those groups, I don't know, Ron, if you had a perspective. I see your pen is up.
Just one more thing to kind of illustrate the point that I was making about goals, because there are some articulated in the pre-read and implicit here, but you know, maybe just to be hyperbolic about it, you know, what if one of the goals of the library was that every Bostonian is polyliterate? You speak multiple languages, you have mastery of a digital language. You can imagine what they all might be. Then all of these domains or the relevant ones point to what the library has to do to make sure that every Bostonian is polyliterate. And the team has to then say, all this content here, does that help us get there?
I think in your question is the point that a goal like that is sufficiently different from an initiative that we should pay attention to what that is and what is its place in this document, for sure.
I think we've struggles too strong a word, but we've talked about this piece almost at least since I joined this group, right? And so are these initiatives meant to fulfill the strategic roles, right, that we have outlined? Or do we think that maybe we're working backwards, that they're meant to fulfill some strategic goals? And I think that maybe it's parsing words, right? And that's sort of where we came down to it. But I think Ron is sort of identifying that a little bit of that struggle of trying to understand sort of where we are in terms of roles versus goals.
But do we have an answer to that? I mean, what is there?
Yeah.
Is there an answer to the question? What are there a handful of things on this list that we're really excited about that we think will animate and inspire the broader community? Or is the answer we're excited about all of them and they're all equally valuable?
I guess I will say what I was going to say before, and I've said this before too. It's the Boston Public Library, we don't do 5 things. We do a lot of things, and I think the prioritization is the important key. I think, yeah, there are certainly some that will resonate more with one community or will resonate more with a different community, but I would be wary of cutting it back too much because we really do have to fulfill a lot of need in the city of Boston and the state, and it needs to be reflected here in the plan for the next, because this isn't a plan for next 1 or 2 years. It's a plan for a long period of time. We're not going to do them all in the first year, of course, but we want to see them all reflective of how are we going to attain those initiatives that we talk about, which I kind of use interchangeably with goals. And these are the ways we're going to do it. And some of them may happen next year, some may happen in 4 years, 5 years, but I would caution about getting rid of them unless we really feel they don't fit strategically for us.
Yeah, and I'll hand the baton to Ray and Paula. Just to clarify, I'm not suggesting we get rid of anything necessarily, but I am suggesting that we have a clear, simple answer to why should people be excited about the strategic plan, and what are a handful of things coming out of this process that people should expect to see that they may not have expected. I think we have to have a clear, compelling answer to that, or this process is not going to be a successful one. But let me hand it to Ray and Paula.
I think, maybe it's just worth the conversation, Michael. I'm actually not convinced, just as one person's view, that the strategic plan needs to encompass everything we do, right? It doesn't need to, somewhere say we lend books, right? There's dozens and dozens of things which I think that we do part and parcel. The strategic plan, at least to me, are sort of like strategic in nature, the focus areas, so to speak, and doesn't have to be comprehensively exhaustive. So that's where I see the prioritization. But again, one person's view.
Paula, and then let's talk about prioritization.
Sure. I was sort of going down the same path as Ray, and I was looking at one of the, we have support social services. That seems to be, I think you could look at that one and kind of think about also what Ron said, like how do you, it's not just support social services. I think it's perhaps building social service resources within the, there's, I think the wording, and some of them are pretty tactical too. So again, is it all inclusive, or are there these aspirational forward thinking roles that need to be built out within the next, 5 to 7 years? So I'm kind of on that same path. I don't think it needs to be all inclusive, but I think there needs to be more framing of what those initiatives are in the strategically, and maybe the tactical doesn't need to be so prevalent.
So I was on a 9-hour flight yesterday, and I was living with all of them, all 50 of your initiatives. And as I was kind of I've been playing with what is the ambition, and I think Ron, your point about goal and what is this support is exactly the right place. There are 2 right places where we are right now in terms of the process. One is what is this in support of and the ambition, and then the second is how do we sequence this work and prioritize this work. But to kind of build on what Michael's observation is, I got excited about every single one of these for somebody in the organization. There's, we've met so many wonderful, talented staff members. They're going to see themselves in this work in an exciting way. So I think, all of that's there. And I know what we want to do today is really look at, do we tighten these up in a way that helps us organize sequencing, prioritization, what comes first so that the rest can flow. But there's so much good stuff already happening in this work that the entire organization, there are individuals who are going to get excited and thrilled about this work.
We're kind of asking this document at this moment in time to do 2 things that are a little bit at odds with each other. Maybe we resolve that next, but right now we're saying, does every person see themselves in this document in a place, or have their own role celebrated? And at the same time, we want you know, the key marquee aspirational society changing elements that we are capable of to stand out. So we're asking it to do, right now, we're asking it to do both of those things. Yeah, so I'm just saying that. I'm not saying, well, what next, but I'm just recognizing that's what we're asking it to do right now.
Yeah, I think that's well put, David. But I guess when I think of strategic plans, they're not necessarily focused on stating what is currently being done, which we think we should continue doing. I think they probably are inherently aspirational, and so I just want us to have a clear response for what are we really excited about being able to do in a new way coming out of this process that wasn't as clear going in. And we're not there yet, but hopefully we will get there as this gets finalized.
Yeah, and I do agree that some of the items still need wordsmithing enough, and part of that work is making sure that they are ambitious statements, or that they are truly an ambition goal that's lurking behind a tactical item. But I do think one of the actions for this group, if we're deciding we're going to do a survey, would be very helpful to know, well, oh no, I as a stakeholder, I as a user, I as a trustee, oh, that makes real sense to me. I would love to see the library fully execute on this particular initiative. You know, no, I don't know who gets a veto at the end of the day, but anyway, I think that would be really, really good perspective from this group to learn about which of the things resonate most. We don't have to do that in the remaining 15 minutes, but I think because there's a not being able to see the trees for the forest experience, and so validating what some of those ambitious goals are, even if we have to tweak the language to get there, would be great. Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna rewind my comment back to Ron's original comment around the strategic goals, and maybe it dovetails with the prioritization piece. What if we made the sub bullets action statements? So if you sort of roll up, right, and sort of zoom up just on any one of them, I'm just looking at it on my own computer, right? And maybe it's too generic, but you know, physical space and sustainability would be an actual aspirational goal, right? Ensure that physical space and sustainability are open to all, you know, through XYZ, and then those pieces there, it becomes a goal, I guess. And I'm just spitballing here.
I think
And is something like developed, that seems to have already happened. Do you know what I mean? Is that, I'm just wondering if that launching the McKim renovation is a big one that would happen in the future. I think, yeah, I think maybe there's things that are already happening that, and I know, Michael, you want to have the staff, and I would agree, see themselves in this, and I think they will, because with the description of the document and the beginning and the introduction and all of the work that's underway and will continue. I don't know, I guess I'm not sure the best way to get the best information from the group, or does it need one more round of sort of David internal leadership looking and saying, this is already happening, this is very tactical, and this is really what the aspiration, spend a little time, you know, wordsmithing the more aspirational forward thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really feeling as a result of this discussion, like we know clearly developed is needed a copy edit too. So, but that this helps us know how to do, you know, you can, if you spend too much time too early trying to get your words and your ambition statements and your like word choice all matched up, you don't have enough play to work with. But I feel like we're at that moment where we can really take this and like I mean, I love the comment about the idea about like, well, what if we grouped something under polyliteracy and saw how many things go there? Now, I would say as a library person, we've been working in the business of literacies and polyliteracies forever, but it's a cool way to explain yourself in a way that catches people's attention and wakes them up to what we're really doing, not what just these kind of sometimes outdated notions of libraries are doing. And I think it's weird because you can see the more time you spend in this process or looking at those roles, you're like, oh, of course that's what the library is. And then other people are sort of like, oh, I was sort of surprised to see the library want to explain themselves that way. And then it gets more and more comfortable and more compelling. So all this to say, I think today's discussion really gives us some good marching orders of just like hitting the right tone and leveling with language. If we use this as the clay.
But I wouldn't describe them as outdated ideas. I don't know if I heard you correctly, but
Oh,
I
you
don't
probably
know if they're
did, but that
outdated.
might have been meant to be provocative. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them outdated. I think they're timeless.
Sounds good. And just as a time check, our team was, do we have until 6 or do we need to wrap up by 5:30? Just to check.
So
I
I
think
have
it
two
was also, there were a
trustees
couple of people
who-
who needed to drop at 5:30, but
Yeah, there were two trustees that need to drop it, which brings me down below quorum, but I just.
If I'm one of those, I can stay, Pamela.
You are one of them, Joe. I didn't want to call you out.
Okay.
I can stay.
All right, we'll condense as we can. I think we're teeing up the next part of the discussion, which is around prioritization, to put a pin on the initiatives. I think we will send a follow-up survey as far as here's the overall list as it is today, where which are the ones that resonate the most, just as a follow-up for this discussion. But before I hop into prioritization, any sort of final thoughts before we leave this slide? All right, so prioritization, we have a couple thought starters to go through today. There's a little bit of stage setting before we dive in, but we have a few prioritization models that we do want to present to this group about where we could start. Again, this is partially to get feedback from this strategic level from the trustee perspective, but as a little bit of foundation setting before we can hop into that discussion, we do want to loop everyone into, we did workshopping with the staff and leadership working group last Monday, and we do want to briefly walk you through the exercise we did with that group around prioritization as well as the results as a way to launchpad the discussion today. So I'll do a quick recap of sort of what we went through with the group last Monday, and then we do want to bring that up one level to get some feedback from this group. So what you're seeing on the screen is an at a glance, the exercise that we ran through on the 23rd. So it was 3 steps. We had the full list of initiatives with the group of about 40 people in the room. And then we took a look at what are different ways that we could cut this or sort of think about the initiatives in context. So the first piece, first behavior that we tried out was calibration. This is similar to an exercise that we did live with this group a few months ago around of each of the roles, which roles do we think will have the greatest impact in the future, and how does that compare to our future state? We actually want to come back to that poll with this group later in the meeting, but I'll lead us towards the discussion first, and then we can do that voting. So we did initial polling with them on the roles to find out where our biggest gaps were. Then we took every single initiative, so all 50 of the initiatives, and we ran them through a scoring sheet where it gave a score out of 50 for how in line with the strategic plan was the initiative, and then what was our organizational capacity to support it. So it was giving a dual score so that we could map it on a grid where one of the axes was organizational capacity, current organizational capacity, and the other axis was strategic fit as a way to look at, do we prioritize initiatives around quick wins? I'll just zoom in on this one. Quick wins, which are items where we have a lot of existing capacity and it's high impact and great strategic fit. Do we look at those marquee initiatives where maybe we have less current capacity, but it's a impactful future initiative? And then on the lower strategic fit, things that we might be very good at now, but might need to evolve in the future is in the bottom right. And then in the bottom left, items that we have low capacity that are low impact and low fit. So again, that's a very quick way of showing the results. So let me zoom into something that's a little more specific for the results of the exercise. So as a quick walkthrough, this was the initial polling with the staff. Again, once I've through this explanation, we're going to come back to this and live poll this group. But just for awareness, the outer edge of this is future impact. So across the group that we were working with, all 4 of the roles scored very highly as far as future impact. The shape that you're seeing in the middle is current capacity for these roles. So just to walk through it, the roles with the smallest gap, so the distance between current and future impact, were lifelong learning and research partner. I think minimal surprise there, and trusted resource. Whereas the ones that had the largest gap was community engagers, so expanding beyond the physical walls, and welcoming destinations, sort of, again, not a huge difference between these, but an initial way to think about the initiatives as far as, do we prioritize items that speak to the biggest gap? Again, I'm going to walk you through the results of all 3 pieces with the staff, and then we'll sort of dive into a bit of a discussion. But also, what were the results of the scoring sheet? So I'll zoom closer to the scoring sheet just so that you can see some of the details for it. So we had them take each of the initiatives. Actually, maybe the one beside is a little higher res. There we go. So they were scoring each initiative individually around, is it in alignment with our value, vision, and mission? Does it align with our strategic roles? And this is where we rolled in the calibration exercise. Based on the gap in the prior poll, we changed the score for each of the roles so that as they were scoring the initiative, they would get more points if there was a greater gap, and less points if it was more of a current strength. Does it demonstrate a gap or need within our community? How strong is the external support? And can we measure and track our impacts? So the results of the blue section would go into that impact and strategic fit. The second half, the organizational capacity, again, it was rating each initiative individually. But do we have the people resources? This is some of the organizational piece. Do we have the monetary or physical resources to support the initiative? How well are we able to get the word out? It might be a fantastic initiative, but can we leverage current channels, or do we need to develop new methods? Are there any risks to this, whether it's complexity, stakeholder buy-in, other factors? Does it involve a lot of organizational change? And does it build upon existing strengths? Again, this was a prototype model as a way to prioritize. And then to do a little bit of the ta-da to frame up our discussion. So in the room, live, prototyping these behaviors. This isn't necessarily the final way we will rate all future initiatives. It was interesting to see the mapping of initiatives. Every one of these post-it notes, I'll go way in. Every one of these post-it notes is one of the initiatives, and you can see the score for impact and organizational fit. At the squint test level, it was interesting that with the group live last week, when we're talking about prioritization with a group of staff and leaders, most of the initiatives ended up in this high impact, high capacity, at least on that test of the scoring system in this top right corner, which was a surprise and caused a lot of interesting discussion around prioritization. I think there was a lot of takeaways around when you're looking at one initiative alone, you might think you have a lot of capacity to support that single initiative versus thinking in more of a systemic level of, if you had to do all 10 initiatives at once, would you do a different rating on the scorecard? So it was looking at different ways we can evolve that conversation, but also some interesting patterns as far as the ones that were a little bit more in that high capacity, high win, spoke a little bit more to the pink, our lifelong learning and research partner, which might be speaking to some of our existing strengths. Whereas the ones that started to shift a little bit more at the squint test level to high impact but lower capacity, again, trending towards that side. We're more in those emerging roles of community engager, that's the orange, or welcoming destination in the teal. Again, this is not a perfect system. I want to put all the caveats possible that we were trying out a new behavior with a selected audience that may not be experts in the initiative they were scoring, but there are some overlaps with those calibrated gaps, and also some recognition that there are organizational capacity pieces that will need to support this initiative. However, given all that, I just want to introduce the discussion. But what does that mean for this group? This is a trustee, the strategic planning committee. How can we bring this up one level to speak a little bit more to prioritization versus a very granular analysis of the initiatives themselves? So we wanted to put together some food for thought around prioritization that was based in that exercise, but recognizing some of the caveats of that exercise, it may be better to consider this at a higher level. So the shapes that you're seeing on the sheet here, I'll just put the titles on, just given the sake of time, is 3 potential models that we could use for looking at these initiatives at a whole. Do we, as trustees, as leaders within the library, should we be looking for those marquee initiatives first? Should we be looking at that impact and strategic fit as a key qualifier for what we need to do first? Looking for that alignment with the strategic plan and the impact outside of the library as a place to start. Recognizing that over many years, we can do more things. Another discussion that happened live with the staff and leader group is perhaps it's less about the score or our capacity or these variables, and maybe it's more about, especially when we're looking at year 1, year 2, year 3, do we go through that wider list and try to seek out the enabling initiatives? So like there's initiatives such as like do some additional community research on what are the needs of our various neighborhoods to determine what to roll out would be an example. That study would enable later work that could need that information to proceed. So do we take a look at the pile of initiatives and seek out those foundational pieces that build our capacity so that we can move faster in the future? And then there could be another version where we focus on improving the scorecard and the way that we evaluate initiatives so that we can really aim at, maybe we start at those top scoring pieces in that top right that are very impactful, that we have a lot of capacity to support, and try to get those quick wins in first in the early years of the strategic plan rollout so that we can get the word out, build excitement, and work on the sort of more difficult or longer track initiatives second while we're rolling these pieces out. Again, all of these are abstractions of different ways we can consider initiatives, but we did want to bring to this group, when we're talking about prioritization, is it really about hitting those marquees, getting the excitement? Is it about building a good foundation? Or do we look for quick wins to get the engine started? Fully recognizing that in the end, we will probably propose a mix of pieces of this logic, but we did want to come to this group when we're thinking about a large grouping of initiatives and we're looking at finalizing the implementation approach for the strategic plan. Do some of these resonate or feel like directions that from your position, we should explore further? That was a lot of me talking. Happy to go back to any of the pieces, but we did want to sort of use some of our time today to speak to where do we start when we're writing these first couple of years of the plan.
Yeah, as you said, Erin, I don't think these are mutually exclusive categories. My view, and I'd welcome the views of others, is that we probably need all 3 of them. And I think this group and the board will likely have a view on all 3, but particularly the marquee initiatives, so-called marquee initiatives. So I would have thought it's a combination of these things. I think there's a lot of data here that we've gathered, and your team has done a nice job gathering, but I still think there's a lot of work to do to communicate this in a way that is simple and clear and makes sense to me. And I realize the library does a lot of things, and we want to continue to do that, and we'll need to do that. But in my experience, for a strategic plan like this to be successful, it has to have a simple message that the broader community can understand. We're all pretty deep into this, some more so than others. And so I think identifying the 3 or 4 marquee initiatives that we're excited about, that we think will animate the broader community, including the philanthropic community, that we think will relate to McKim and other major capital campaigns that are needed, is important. But these other things are also important. I think identifying a couple of enabling initiatives that we think will unlock other opportunities would be interesting. Are the enabling initiatives going to be the most exciting piece of the plan? I doubt it. I don't think the concept of suggesting that we do more work to find out what others might think is necessarily going to be as resonant as some of these other items. But I absolutely also think that top quartile initiatives, understanding what we can do with relatively little effort and have a big impact, I mean, that seems like an important, critical piece of the plan. So, yeah, I think there's a lot here. So maybe others could just comment generally about the methodology and what we think the plan should be doing and how it should be relating to these 3 categories.
I mean, I don't have any thoughts beyond what Christian said. I'm trying to digest all of this. It's a lot to
Yeah.
kind of come up
I think
respond
I
to.
think it's a combination, and then it seems like there's got to be some culling, like we said when we do that survey. You know, after we cull, it might be easier, you know, to prioritize a little bit and then figure out how they all fit in. But it seems like a combination of both. I would definitely want a few 3 to 5 really interesting, you know, the moonshot ideas we talk about, but that aren't really moonshot, that we're going to get there, but we need to have the additive resources and support and capacity. It'll help with, I think, David and the team to really think about funding.
Yeah, this is a little bit about how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
Which I think is nice to be able to demonstrate the thoroughness. But having lived with this, I think we do need all 3, but how we present them in the document may be different so that they're not distracting from each other.
Do we feel like there is actually a list of marquee initiatives, moonshot initiatives, what have you, that have come out of these meetings or from other input? I've provided a bunch of them, what I think are things in that category. Others on this committee may have a view, but I mean, do we actually have a list of things that we would put in that category or not? And if so, if we have a list, how are we testing it? I think that is something that we probably want the board to provide a view on at that level.
I think to date, there's been a little bit of an equity approach around the initiatives versus, I'll use the term tall poppies comes to mind, but I think in the discussions last week and the discussion today, having some sort of language within the document to have a bit of a hierarchy around which of these initiatives are enablers. Like, can you just look at the role initiative at a glance and see which ones are foundation building versus which ones are marquee? And I think our team is excited to take all the feedback we've had in the last week or 2 and sort of do some grouping and analysis within the list as it stands to find those differentiators. As far as off the top of my head, Christian, sort of thinking about that 3 to 5, but I'm all out of words today, but I think we're looking forward to doing that next round where there is a way to sort of see at a glance very quickly versus just the bullet point list, as far as what's supporting our future, what's a quick win, what's like in these categories that we're showing today.
And I also think there's an opportunity. It's the initiative is in service to that ambition. And I love Ron's, statement. As a result of this work, all Bostonians will be. And I think that's where we really want to get the galvanization and the excitement of the marquee statement, whether it's an initiative or whether it's a goal or whether, you know, it's the ambition that says a result. That's what is exciting to me for you all as we look at some of these initiatives. So for example, the embracing of the immigrant work is exciting because there's so much good work for new Americans that's happening at Hartford, that's happening at LA, but Boston is the most interesting and diverse immigrant population there is in this country. And as a result, our BPL's continued investment in helping our immigrant populations can elevate BPL to be a leader in this work as well. So I think, you know, those are where I see the opportunities and the aspirations for y'all. And it's, you know, that's exactly where y'all are to push that forward.
Just to answer Christian's question, I mean, you have it in the appendix, right? It's that top left of the marquee, right? And so there are things that are sort of, you know, I'm just looking very high glance just to get people excited, you know, that's sort of near the 50-50 mark. So one of them is create programs that blend education and fun, such as interactive workshops, theme-based activities, encouraging reading, right? Another one that sits here at the risk of repeating 4740, right? Continue to be a dependable source of unbiased information, supporting intellectual freedom, ensuring patrons' right to access a diverse range of reading and educational resources. So, I mean, you have a handful that sort of are near the 50-50 mark, which I think is sort of answers your question, Christian. It's in the appendix, but it's worth sort of pulling out.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're in here. I just don't think they're all written as if they are relatable as the marquee initiative that they can be yet.
Yeah, and I think Paula, to your point as well, and you had sent through the it's not special connections BPL fund linked initiative to the McKim as well. Like I think having those, calling out some of those larger already in progress pieces is really important as well.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, Ray, and I agree with you and David, but I think coming up with a robust list of, you know, whatever it is, 7 to 10 items that a group can think about and prioritize and articulate as the marquee initiatives that we're excited about is important. And I think there are, you know, there are things that you can imagine would also be on that list in terms of making, one might be to make the treasure of the library more tangible and more accessible to people, and that would dovetail to the community engager. You could imagine making the special collections more a part of the McKim project in partnership with other organizations. You can think about pushing things out to other sites. I'm thinking of the San Francisco airport, for example, that has a installation that the San Francisco Opera does. You can imagine, you know, in a moonshot sense, having some of the special collections at the airport, or having, you know, these are things that may or may not fly, but I'd love to see things that are a little bit more in that nature. We've talked about you know, overhauling the technology library such that there be an app where you could distill the programming in a way that really resonates and is individualized and bespoke for people. Again, I'm just speaking extemporaneously here, but we've talked about things that I think are in that category, and I just love to create a list that we can all think about and prioritize.
Coincidentally, there's, by my count, something like 7 to 8 or 7 to 9 initiatives that are all 40/40 or above, and sort of with a total score of 80 or above, right? And so you can start with that list as a base and play around with that in terms of prioritization.
We might be putting David on the spot if we ask him for the things he's excited about, because you need to, all of your children need to be exciting. But I'd love, Paula, are there things you're getting excited about that you've seen as part of the development?
The McKim renovation is really a big one, and it should be kind of a moonshot because it's going to be huge. And I think that needs to be front and center, because as we think about the capacity, that's going to be an all-in effort. So I would put that right at the top, and it's it's going to be amazing.
Mhm.
I also think social service, we talk about social services, well, we don't have a social worker in the library now. So I think we really need to build that component. I mean, that I would get excited about that piece as well. Is it a moonshot? I think it's super important for the community of Boston, since they're in our places, in our spaces, and we just don't have the resources, and it also serves the staff as well. So those are, I mean, there's a lot of things that excite me. I don't know if they're categorized as the moonshot, but yeah, I think a lot of them we're doing well already again. So it's that positioning of whether or not those are included and how we think about the, the enablers.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold fire on that, Margaret, until probably next time. I know they're in there. I know what they are. But I wanna get to the next point in the process.
And just to confirm, we will send out as a follow-up survey, the full list of initiatives, sort of identifying, what people are excited about, just so that everyone will have a chance to look at it. I think the other thing that we'll include in that survey, just in the nature of time, is we want to get that pulse of sort of impact versus current state from this group. So if we're doing up a follow-up survey, we would propose to include that scale out of 5, so we can see if there's any differences between this group and the staff. So we'll mark that. You'll see that coming out following the meeting. So I'm going to skip ahead briefly to next steps, and then that'll leave us a little bit of time for new business or any public comment. So I'm sure there's a lot of curiosity. Where are we in the process? What's upcoming? We've shared this out as we've been working our way through. We are here at the end of September. The input that we're having today is sitting right on this line, but also coming out of a week where we have connected with union groups, done a quick update for the board, an in-depth session with staff and leaders. So tons of great input that has come in the last week and a half that we will be rolling into the next draft of the plan, which will include those chapters that previously have not been issued, as well as iterations on the chapters from the current draft. We're currently working with David and team to determine sort of the schedule to November 19th and sort of working our way back from that. I don't have that for you today, but it will be existing very shortly. We're also looking at scheduling some executive committee meetings in the coming weeks to review the next version of the draft. Couple headlines that I may have already hit verbally, forgetting there was
Oh yeah, we lost you, Erin. You're on a freeze.
She timed out of the KPIC.
I know, she was done.
They cut her off at the Kirsty business.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, she was about to go through headlines, Margaret. Do we know what they are? I'm wondering if they're in the box on the bottom left. Like, how well can we do without Erin Delia?
Oh, wait, there's the rest of us. I think what she was about to say was where we are going, which is, if my memory serves me well, we're going to have 2 sessions with the trustees, some working sessions. And Pamela's been making sure we get those scheduled.
We have the date set for those 2, October 15th and November 4th.
And those are executive committee meetings, I believe, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Or I thought it was the full trustees. It's
No.
not, it's just the executive committee.
It's another.
Executive committee that was selected by the trustees at the board meeting to kind of shepherd the final draft before it gets presented to the full board.
And just, I'm sorry, just to
But
be,
they're all welcome to attend.
I think, yeah, I think we do. I think we said everyone is going to be welcome because it
Yes.
is obviously
Correct.
something
We'll
relevant to
send
the
out.
entire board. So, yeah, as I understand it, the idea is to have those executive committee discussions and other members of the board would be welcome to attend. I think it's going to be really interesting and helpful to get this group's input coming out of this meeting. What I'm hearing is that there is a lot of excitement with this process and a general alignment with the overall vision, but we're all anxious to see the prioritization and a more clear sense of what we think we want to emphasize. And as I understand it from the Gensler and Margaret Sullivan teams, that is what we're really focused on right now is applying the methodology, trying to come up with that proposed prioritization. But again, I'd welcome this group's views, and I think surveying this group and getting their sense on which of the strategic initiatives are particularly exciting will be valuable.
Yeah, I think a real invitation. Get into those initiatives. I wish I could give you a 9-hour flight to get into them.
Erin, you are back, and we
I'm
see
back.
you again.
I have spent too much time at the BPL today and I got booted and had to relog in. So apologies. I was like, it's like 3 hours, right? Give or take. Anyways, yes, screen share should be back. I assume I just missed a little bit about the executive committee, but I will get my team to wrap me up on that. Before I hand back to Christian and co, any other final notes that our team should record, we will send the follow-up survey and we'll include an open-ended comment for anything else we didn't get to as well.
can I ask just a personal question? Pamela, have you sent a calendar invite yet for those 2 meetings?
No, because I'm confirming the space. It's a tight day here in the library, and I'm just trying to confirm the room and make sure that we have the capacity that we need to accommodate the meeting. But yes.
Yeah, that answered my other
Confirmed it
question.
is October 15th though.
You answered my other question by answering that one, which is it's in person, I believe.
It's in person.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll hand back to Christian.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. Are there any other comments before we close? I think there's more work to be done, to be clear, but hopefully the message that we really welcome input and are grateful for the committee's thoughts is also coming through loud and clear. Any parting thoughts, though, from anyone on where we're going or what people want to see?
I mean, I would just encourage, I loved hearing everyone's, Ron, your hyperbole, your Joe, your questions. I think all those are the ways in which we engage in this work to help support it. So we welcome the creative energies and the techniques and tactics that you enjoy, and just have fun with it. And I think, there's a strong invitation to help with the prioritization and the sequencing of this work.
Got it. And thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Margaret. Any other new business that people wanted to raise? I know Jose unfortunately couldn't make it, but is there anything else that people would like to raise as part of this meeting? Hearing nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
Is there any public comment?
Thank you. I was just going to say, for the record, there is no public comment.
Thank you, Pamela.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you
Thanks,
so
Tom.
much. Great meeting, everybody.